Sparks that I don't remember. Hold and let it shine. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away. Fix and start to fade away.
Hello, dear friends of Kabala International. We are once again in dialogue with Mario Sabán.
How are you, Nacho? Shalom to all. A great pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Mario, likewise. We are going to talk about study and meditation. And to begin this talk, I would like to ask you, and also reflect on why there is always a criterion and a concept that study and meditation are two disciplines that are completely disassociated, that are separate.
Totally. Look, there are many factors by which we in principle culturally associate meditation to the contemplative act or eventually to the realization of mantras with certain sounds, and we do not realize that when we say meditation, the objective implies the increase of the level of consciousness through various branches. With respect to study, what has happened in the history of the West has been a bit disastrous because we have used the intellect a bit for amusement, for the increase of the ego, for abstract speculations that had nothing to do with reality. In short, what in Greece were the sophists, those who permanently lucubrated subjects in abstraction and peddled in the air. In the Jewish tradition we have it with the pill pool, that is to say, people who permanently debated and debated and debated and debated, and in reality they did not reach the experience. So the intellect was suspected of being an element even contrary to nature, even in this sense. Some philosophers, especially those of existentialism, attack the abstraction of philosophy. And in Kabbalah what we have clearly is that we move away from the abstraction of the sophist or the one who does not get anywhere, because in the end our question is, what is the use of this? What is the practical sense? What is the experience? Yes, the whole theoretical question, the whole intellectual question bridges with reality, so we are meditating on reality because we are uniting the ideas of abstraction, and also it is not wrong sometimes to play games of abstraction to better understand reality. The only problem, and in all spiritualities this is very much said, very much reiterated, isn't it? The map is not the territory. When they say in all spiritualities the map is not the territory, it is because our mind operates on the map and forgets the territory. So what we have to do is that the mind operates on the territory and we do not invalidate the map. The map also has its function. What we cannot do is to use the map against the territory. So what we have to do is to associate the map to the territory, knowing that it is a map and that we can get lost in the map, but not in the territory. That is the territory where I cannot get lost. So when I don't want to get lost in the territory, I have to understand that the study has to have a contact with reality. Look, one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, a very famous Austrian Jew who went to New Zealand expelled by the Nazis, he fled from Austria, was Karl Popper. And Popper said that when a professor at the university, his students did not understand what he was explaining, it meant that he was not explaining correctly, that the professor himself did not really understand what he was talking about. Therefore, Popper said that sometimes there is a structure in the different disciplines of a certain specialized language to demonstrate a certain intellectual arrogance. So that is where we in the chamber are aware that the intellectual, if it is not linked to reality, can be altered and can enter into what we call the imbalance of understanding, the clipa de la vina. Therefore, what must be done? We have to understand that when we interpret a text, for example, at an intellectual level, this work of interpretation must not be dissociated from reality. We have to keep reality in mind. It is not only a work of textual interpretation, it is that the text leads to practical elements in the order of reality, to a transformation in the order of matter. That is to say, our perception of abstraction has to end up producing a real change. Therefore, when we are, and this is said by several critics of the theories of religions, and it is absolutely linked to what I sincerely believe about what happens in Kabbalah, that interpretation and revelation go hand in hand. That is to say, if revelation is a channeling of information that comes to many people at the level of intuitive knowledge interpretation, which is the staging of rational or structured content, also has something of revelation. That is to say, interpretation and revelation go hand in hand. And what does this imply? Not only intuitive knowledge is a meditative act, the contemplation that leads me to the opening of intuitive knowledge, but also what we could call rational contemplation. That would be the interpretation of the text. And the interpretation of the text, which must always be tied to a link with reality, must lead me to meditate. Look, there is a dialogue that has always caught my attention between Einstein and Gödel. You know that Gödel was one of the great mathematicians of Czech origin of the 20th century, and that Einstein said at one point, "The truth is that I am at Princeton only because of this man, because otherwise this would be very boring. I have no one to talk to." And they were walking around talking, and at one point they gave me the conclusion that when we rationalize in formulas, it is because we have meditated and contemplated before. That is to say, our knowledge that seems rational because we have structured it as rational, because we have presented it as formulas, in truth they are ideas that have enlightened us, and then we have tried to look for the formula to reveal this idea. It is not that we discover something in the formula, we discover it and we look for in the formula the possibility of having a language of revelation, the possibility of having a language of revelation of intuition. Therefore, in that very interesting dialogue, it is in one of the works it is written, it is a very beautiful dialogue between them. It is all we had a dialogue of interpretation. So, every interpretation that I am doing cannot be broken from the intuitive field. It has a very big component of the meditative act. So I perform a meditative act, and I can dance and I can meditate like the dervishes, where I am meditating while dancing, which in Kabbalah terms would be to lower the meditation to Netzach, and I can meditate thinking. That is, I can meditate by bringing it down to the text. So, the text, when I am writing a book, if I am not writing it from the pure sophistic abstraction of intellectual speculation, but trying to get into it, to get absolutely involved in the subject, that is, to make the Torah made flesh, as Jeremiah would say. So, when I enter and make the letter flesh, of course, information comes out, and the study for Kabbalah is an act of meditation, of course, clearly. It is not a suspicious study, which does not correspond to a reality, but on the contrary, it is one more element that God gave us for our service.
Two things occurred to me while you were speaking. One is why there is, shall we say, an exacerbation and excessive importance of intuitive knowledge, so to speak, in the new spiritualities, to the detriment of what you speak of rational contemplation. And then the other concept that came to my mind was the concept of Haim Torah, of doing in life what is in the Torah. In short, empirical knowledge. Why do you think this is happening?
Look, there are in each of the points you have touched on, which are very interesting. The first one, I'm going to be very radical. Perhaps some people may even be offended by this one. I think that ignorance is very bold. So, I think it is true that there are many people who channel, but many people are not serious when it comes to presenting that channeling. That is, what does it mean that they are not serious? that there has to be an effort of reading. There has to be an effort of reading, writing, an effort of transmission. I am not going to put anyone's channeling at stake because I am not a judge. Each one has a channeling and all channeling is respectable. But it seems to me that what cannot be done is to take the excuse of channeling to somehow hide ignorance. The great ignorance that exists in so many people. I mean, I think there has to be an intellectual commitment for us to have conceptual categories of understanding of what is happening at the level of channeling. That is, I am not against channeling. I reiterate again, Nacho. On the contrary. I believe that each soul is receiving information, and it is information that we need at the level of humanity, but there must be a seriousness when presenting these channelings with a conceptual structure, especially, I would say, for the correct transmission. Because if not, there is a transmission that is very deficient. This is in the first place. And secondly, concerning the second point you raised about the Torah as a way of life, we must be very careful about the whole question of the commandments here. First of all, because the commandments are adapted, they have to be in some way adapted to the context of the modern society in which we live. Because many may raise the banner that the Torah must be put into operation, but be careful with what kind of interpretation it is going to be put into operation. It means that in the 2 points you have brought up, there are 2 dangers. The first is an uncontrolled esotericism without categories.
That's why I put both of them.
Of course, you have brought me 2 Satans. In one, an uncontrolled esotericism without intellectuality. That is, I am ignorant and I love to do it because I just channel, which I find aberrant. Please read a little, it's okay, books don't eat. And you continue channeling, but channel under categories that we can understand. And then the second, do not tell me that the Torah is life, according to a particular interpretation that you have, which can be radio dogmatic. So, well, thank you, Nacho. I thank you for bringing up these 2 dangers, and we have analyzed them. Because in general, what happens with these 2 dangers is that many people fall into both. That falls into both, and both have certain, I would say, structures that hide a satanic strategy at the bottom.
That is why it seemed pertinent to me to talk about this subject fundamentally, because we are talking about the subject of study and meditation, and they are, let us say, like 2 apparently antagonistic elements, but which seem to be able to converge towards the same point.
It happens that there are 2 types of vessels. A type of vessel that is empty and a type of vessel that is full. We have to have a full vessel to empty it. But an empty vessel has to be willing to be filled. So you can't transmit what you don't have. So even if you use words in a Baroque way without transmitting anything, well, I would say, people don't want to transmit what they don't have. Well, I would say, people are not fools. I mean, we are not stupid to realize that at the end of a 1-hour conference, if there is an empty structure, they will be throwing me the fruitless husks. So, what I have to try to look for is, what is the fruit of this? Someone can still tell me, look, with the shells you can also be liquefied. It is true, it is a little bit harder because you have to have a blender. But actually, I think the fundamental issue is to go deep. If I am going to use words as a kind of Baroque poetry, that is not showing me anything, in reality it is a garment that I cannot buy because I cannot find anything on the other side. I believe that we have to be profound, we have to be responsible, and we have to be responsible not only in the transmission, but also in the conceptual organization, because we know in Kabbalah that so much channeling without conceptual organization leads to psychic imbalance. So it is not only because someone can sell smoke to the people, but also because what is produced is an imbalance of the person himself who lives in a vacuum. That is to say, he lives in a situation that is not normal. That is to say, he is building something that is pure superficiality. So I believe that if a person is honest, not only, I repeat, organize the concepts for the sake of transmission, but there has to be an organization of the concepts for the sake of your psychic balance.
In terms of what you were saying about the vessels, the empty vessels and the full vessels, we have spoken on several occasions about the flexibility of the vessel to be able to receive. And I am left with a concept that I extracted from one of your books that says that we have to live and enjoy the delight of continuous growth in that flexible vessel that enlarges as it receives. That is the way it is.
And everything always suspecting how good and evil intermingle, always suspecting that I may be on a path, where on that path beware, because there may be many self-deceptions. So the very existence of the path is a self-deception in itself, so we have to be very careful.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you.